I think that Intel is potentially a really good investment case for the next 18 to 24 months. And let's start with looking at the financials quickly before we go into the reasons why things has been happening and why I think things will get better soon. So revenue wise, they usually used to be at around 78 to 80 billion in 2020 and 2021. And then you can see that they started to lose place, and also their competition, Taiwan Semiconductor, on the manufacturing side, and AMD on the design side, started to gain market share. Gross profit didn't improve at all, so actually Intel's gross profit really suffered, and even more so their net income. And these things obviously is why the stock hasn't done anything substantial compared to, let's say, AMD stock, Nvidia even, or Taiwan Semiconductor over the past, let's say, 5 years, despite Intel offering fairly good dividend yield. Now let's have a look at cash on hand. So again, you can see that roughly half the position of Taiwan Semiconductor, much more than AMD, but again, you cannot compare to AMD since it's much smaller company. The interesting thing here is that despite Intel actually having more half the cash on hand compared to TSMC, they seem to have much more debt. And AMD is in a really good position because their debt is basically 1.7 billion, but their cash on hand is 6 billion or so. So they are in a good position financially. And then finally, just look at R&D and research and development. So Intel is definitely investing in the future. So you cannot take that away from them at least. And I think this is potentially good in my opinion if they can get value back from their investments, which I think they will get soon. So that's more the financial, and let's have a look at why the graphs looks like they did, and the main reason behind it is basically you cannot run away from it. This is the semiconductor manufacturing process, and you can see that Intel in terms of 2014 they were clearly the leader on the planet, and they enjoyed very good margins back then. And this is mainly due to that you can see that their density, so the amount of transistors they were able to put per square millimeter, was higher than everyone else. And you can see here that Intel is at 44 and Taiwan Semiconductor at 28. And to be honest, these numbers are a bit not so correct always. The main important thing here is to have a good relationship between the relative numbers of each step we go down in finer detail. So I don't think you can trust, for example, that any of these numbers are exactly correct, but they are roughly in the right ballpark, I would say. As time went on, and with introduction of the extreme ultraviolet machines from the Dutch company ASML, which is an improved technology compared to the deep ultraviolet technology, and so you can see that TSMC started with their EUV machines in 2018 at their so-called 7 nanometer process, and Intel was still like using the EUV machines, and you can start to see that actually TSMC is starting to go places, because Intel, despite introducing their more dense more dense process in 2018, it actually had bad yield. So sure, you can say that they introduced it roughly at the same time. I think still TSMC was ahead with their 7 nanometer in 2018. But despite that, I mean, the Intel yields were not good, whereas TSMC was like manufacturing good quality A12 chips for Apple in like the millions or tens of millions, even hundreds of millions if you include AMD's Zen 2 and Epic second generation. So this is where like they started to change the roles in that set. So TSMC is now becoming the market leader. And you can see that just like in 2020, when Apple introduced the Apple A14 and the M1 series, you can see that TSMC is at 5 nanometer now. And Intel's still struggling with the 10 nanometer process. And you can see that also like in 2022, when TSMC introduces the enhanced 5 nanometer process, with the which is called basically 4 nanometer. Again, Apple introduces the A16, and AMD also later comes with their laptop consumer chips, and Intel is still struggling with their 10 nanometer process. So now like we are talking like something close to 4-5 years of struggling with the same 10 nanometer process. Sure, they rebranded, repatch it a bit, there's some minor tweaks here and there, but essentially it's the same process. Also, they did this funny thing with actually renaming. So the 10 nanometer superfine process, the ESF process, got rebranded to Intel 7. But still, it's the same density roughly as the same old 10 nanometer introduced back in 2019 and 18. Anyways, you can see that 2023, so we are basically getting to today. TSMC introduces just last couple of weeks the first product with the 3 nanometer process, which is the new Apple iPhone. And you can see that the density is going really places. I mean, the reported numbers I think is 183 million transistors per square millimeter. But then again, I think I was a bit disappointed with those numbers. That's one other topic, but I think there's possibility. Some good sources say that this 3 nanometer process can be up to even 240 or 50 million transistors per square millimeters. But anyways, you can see that on time for TSMC with the 3 nanometer. Now, things gets interesting here because also we know that in December 14, Intel will launch their Meteor Lake processors for the laptops. And that one is based on the Intel 4 process. And I've tried to figure out the density for that process, and it's difficult. Most sources say that it's closer to the TSMC 3 nanometer than 5 nanometer, and even like between the TSMC 4 and 3 nanometer. So suddenly, from nowhere, it seems like Intel is at least doing better. And sure, this is for Meteor Lake, basically at the beginning of 2024, because December 14th of 2023 is basically, 2024. So this is not for like the high volume products. But the interesting thing here is that Intel confidently now says that the next process, the Intel 3, with let's say around 200 million transistors, which is very close to, or even in some sense better than TSMC's 3 nanometer, that products with those kind of processors will be available by next year. I think this is the server line, and this is interesting because now you would be in a position, okay, how will the AMD servers perform compared to the Granite Rapids and the Sierra Forest servers from Intel in 2024? Even if AMD would enjoy leadership, which I'm skeptic about, but I do think that AMD will be very competitive even in 2024 on the server line. So I don't have any worries in that sense for AMD. But I do think that the customers might start to think, maybe Intel is kind of starting to come back, especially like within 1 year with Granite Rapids. So you could say that maybe we won't see the same evolution in terms of market share gain or the same pace for AMD compared to Intel, or in the reverse, that maybe Intel is stop losing their market share. And this would probably be visible in the revenues for, let's say, Q4 2024, or at least I guess you have to, as I said in the beginning of the video, be patient, and maybe let's say Q2 of 2025. I think that's when things starts to look better for Intel. The interesting part here is that now it's very interesting because as we go to 2 nanometer or thereabouts, 20 angstrom as Intel call it, you start to need even a more advanced machine, which is this newer ASML machine based on extreme ultraviolet. But now it's the next generation, which is high NA EUV machines. And these machines have basically, I think, a wavelength of 7 nanometers, so which is roughly half of the previous first generation EUV machines. And most industry insiders say that Intel is actually going to be the first company using those new machines in late 2024 and 2025. And this is actually a role reversal again, compared to, let's say, the introduction of the first gen EUV machines, where TSMC enjoyed the lead with 7 and 5 nanometer. And maybe we start to see Intel retaking back their crown in that sense with the 18 angstrom in 2025, and also in the with the 20A node in 2024. And based on those, you could argue that even on the consumer side with the Arrow Lake, which will fight against AMD Zen 5, I don't think Intel will be in a especially bad position actually going, especially late 2024 and early 2025 and onwards. So let's just have a quick look at the server side. You can see here that, I mean, as I said earlier in the video, that in 2022 things looked really dire. I mean, you had like, I don't know, Intel products with 20 and 40 cores fighting against AMD products with like 64 and 96 cores. Yeah, not looking that great actually. I know that you cannot compare each core to from different companies to other, but we know that the AMD Zen 3 and Zen 4 cores are much better than the Intel Ice Lake based cores. 2023, so this year, Sapphire Rapids are finally coming out, but still they are not competitive with AMD's Genoa and Bergamo and Genoa X and so on. So again, even 2023, things are not looking really good, which we can see in the Intel's reporting. We can see here that the numbers for data center and the AI group are looking quite dire, I would say. Actually going for, sorry, this is the 2022 numbers. Let's have a look at 2023. Yeah, you can see that their data center is down 15% year on year. But again, we are probably in the midst of the last few really bad quarters for Intel, and things could probably take a turnaround very soon. And the turnaround I'm talking about is basically based on Sierra Forest and Grand Rapids. Why do I say that? Well, the industry rumors and people that I have followed that I have good trust in seem to indicate that Grand Rapids will be roughly 120 cores, and these are like based on Intel 3 nanometer, and they will face off with AMD's Turin, and which is based on probably TSMC 4 nanometer. Maybe Turin Dense is TSMC 3 nanometer, but anyways, even if all of them are on TSMC 3 nanometer, Intel 3 nanometer seems to be kind of competitive. So I don't expect like as bad as positioning for Intel's lineup in 2024 compared to 23 and especially 2022. And also going forwards in 2025, you could say that Diamond Rapids, which is another evolution on Grand Rapids, rumors are that there will be another 50% increase in cores. Some people even stating like 240. I don't know. These are like once we go into 2025 and 2026, things are getting like really sketchy. I mean, it's difficult to know what products companies will launch. But based on these, like based on the numbers we can see here, I think server lineup for Intel will look quite okay in 2024. The desktop lineup, again, going to 2024, we can see that the rumors are that Allo Lake, according to Intel's own presentation recently, will be based on 20A and TSMC 3 nanometer actually. And they will fight off with Zen 5, which is AMD's next generation, probably 4 nanometer process. So I don't think like Intel will be in a especially bad position actually next year onwards. So looking at this kind of picture and seeing that things start to get good on the technology side, I do think that the numbers also will start to look better. So this is the financial results of Q2 of this year, and you can see that the client computer and data center is together like 4 plus 6.8 billion. And I do think that even if they lose some market share here and lose more margin here, that's basically this quarter, next quarter, and maybe the first 2 quarters of next year. I do expect that the bleeding will stop by Q3 next year, and probably even like regaining at least, maybe let's say not complete market share as previously, but maybe they will regain their gross margins because they will be so competitive again against AMD again. So I think like considering all this stuff and looking at the stock price, so let's have a look at the semiconductors. You can see that Intel right now sits at just below 150 billion US dollar market cap. Nvidia, again, it's more than 6-7 times the size of Intel, and I don't think that's sustainable. And then AMD, I think they are slightly larger than Intel on the market cap, and compared to Intel this looks expensive, but again, there's other stuff going for AMD, especially on the graphics and AI market with their MI300, which I spoke on previously. So I don't think AMD is that expensive in terms of to relation to Nvidia. But Intel, I think, is a really good. I would at least follow them very closely now and see maybe in the next earnings report, then when they will like get the guidance for Q4 this year, and when we see the reactions to Meteor Lake, and the rumors are that Meteor Lake will be competitive against AMD's mobile lineup. So I don't expect them to be in a bad position. And finally, if you look at Intel, so if you look at Intel, you can see that back in 2020 and thereabouts, they used to make something like 20 billion or 24 billion US dollar in net income. And if you basically now start to regain some of that money and consider that the PE ratio of the company would be, I don't know, 20, that would result in a company that is worth like 400 billion on the market at least. And then look at the market cap now at 150. So I do believe that Intel is actually really looking attractive now. So yeah, I don't know if you agree with me, so thank you for watching. And sorry for this very, very long video, but I think it's very important to go through the manufacturing side with all the numbers of transistor density, and then look at the financials a bit. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please like and put a comment on the video, and see you in the next one.